we've got Lisa Nowak.
Yay!
Well, I hope I can do as good a job as they did because I've never done this before. I need notes too. I'm Lisa Nowak, the author of Red Wide Open, which is a story about 15-year-old Cody Everett. He, after suffering a lifetime of abuse from his manipulative mother, he gets busted for vandalism and gets shipped off to live with his uncle in Eugene. He's a guy who calls himself Race, eats Twinkies for breakfast, and drives a stock car at the local speedway. And Cody's not really sure about spending his Saturday nights watching a bunch of rednecks drive around in a circle, but he eventually feels himself drawn into the community. And more importantly, his uncle becomes the mentor and friend that he's always been looking for. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why personal experience is the best kind of research. You've probably all heard the expression, write what you know. And that's really good advice because research is a lot of work. So you can save time if you use your personal experience. Another thing is that our experience makes our stories rich and authentic by providing those vivid details that make the story believable. People with the same experience that the author has are going to respect the author because they know that those things are real, and people who haven't had that experience are going to believe the author because they sound like an authority on the subject. As readers, we tend to look for authenticity, and we feel loyalty to an author when we find that authenticity. On the other hand, you know, we've all seen movies or read books where we just didn't believe the details. For me, it was when I was a kid watching the Star Wars movies. I could never watch them in peace because my dad was always sitting there saying, "You'd never hear those explosions. There's no sound in space. It's a vacuum." So in my own writing, I've used personal experience to add depth to my books. And the more glamorous aspect of that is that I built and raced stock cars for 13 years. I started in Eugene, Oregon, and then I loaded everything up and went to North Carolina to fully immerse myself in that experience. And in fact, the car on my cover is actually one of the cars I raced at Hickory because it's very difficult to find the stock image of a race car. Really my experience racing is only a small part of what goes into the book, though, to make it believable. I've used other life experiences as well, and one of those things is just my experience living in Eugene, which is where the book is set. You'll find a lot of physical and cultural details about that city. I can see my Go Ducks, you know. You know, you might think, well, I have to live someplace exciting to write about it, but that's really not true. We want to see those details in a book that makes the setting come alive to us. And I think that's particularly true if the book happens to be set in our hometown. Other things that I've used in my books, just everyday things, are things such as running a small business, being a weather geek. I lived in my van for a year. And then the angst of the first time you share your writing with somebody when you're young, that plays into Cody's experiences because he's a writer too. And then the personalities of my cats. I have 2 cats that have made it into my books. I'm kind of surprised that somebody over there isn't upstaging me. I heard him meowing earlier. Hold him up, let everybody see. He's so cute. So the good thing about using personal experience is that it's generally a lot easier than research, and it can be more convincing. It's difficult to get all of the details that make something come alive by just Googling a subject. And even when you interview people, it's tough because you have to know exactly what sort of questions to ask. And even then, somebody else's experience isn't going to be the same as yours, and things that mean something to them aren't going to be the same details that mean something to you. In my own life, one of the subjects that came up is driving on the road versus driving on the track. You might think, oh, well, I've taken my car quickly through some corners, and so I know what it'd be like to get into a race car. And that only goes so far because you know what the centrifugal force feels like in a corner, you know what it feels like when the tires get out from under you. But what you really can't experience until you get into that race car for the first time is something like the sensory overload that happens, where you're not only having to control the car, but you're also having to pay attention to what the gauges are doing, listen to the engine noise, make sure that you're not crashing into anybody else. And while all this is going on, you're following the guy in front of you so closely that you can't even see his taillights, which is really nerve-wracking. But those are the kind of details that you actually have to be in a race car before you're going to experience. Now, I know not all of us have driven a race car, but we all have valuable life experience. And an author shouldn't discount their experience just because they think it's not glamorous enough. I've gotten just as much good feedback on details about welding or about living in a rundown trailer as I have about my racing experience. As readers, we want details that make a story seem real. And it doesn't matter if those details are ordinary things like waiting tables or working on a car, or little things we remember from our childhood, like you had a bike where the chain kept falling off. Those are the kinds of things that make the story come alive for people. I think that this is especially true in YA because kids are just discovering things that we as adults take for granted. Some of these things are physical, like learning to drive, or experiencing your first kiss or going off to college. But then there are also those things, those negative emotions that we're afraid to talk about because we think people will think we're terrible people if they know we have those things going on in our head. And some of these things might be those fantasies you have about the cute kid in your class, or how you might wish something bad would happen to your best friend because you're just feeling really jealous of them, or how you don't always love your parents the way you think you should. So when we encounter these kinds of things in a book, we say, hey, I thought I was the only one who ever felt that way. And we feel comforted in knowing that we're not alone in those things. So I think that in that way, our personal experiences can be of value to younger people because it makes them feel like they're not a freak for having these emotions. So now I'm going to read a scene from Running Wide Open that incorporates a variety of details from my personal experience, including some of those universal truths I remember from being 15. The cool thing about Race was that he didn't act like a parent, more like a brother or an older friend. He never gave me grief about the petty stuff Mom had obsessed over. That's why it irked me when he got on my case about stealing the street sign. It had tempted me every time we went to Springfield for groceries. Located at 4th and Main, it said simply, police. An arrow indicated the direction to the station a mere 2 blocks away. Who could resist a challenge like that? Rationalizing that in the middle of the week there'd be less traffic, I waited until Tuesday night. I borrowed some tools from the box Race kept in the van, then hoofed it across the bridge at 2 a.m. The heist was easy. I shinnied up the pole, busted the sign loose, and hightailed it. Not a single car interrupted me. It wasn't until I got home that I had trouble. When I turned the handle of the trailer's back door, I realized I'd locked myself out. No big deal. Race kept a spare key under a brake drum near the carport. I retrieved it and stuck it in the knob, but it wouldn't turn. The front door must have a different lock. Okay, I could deal with that. Race slept like a zombie. A parade of hippopotami could sneak by him. Maybe if I'd been a hippopotamus, I'd have had better luck. Cody, Race mumbled as I pulled the door to a quiet click behind me. I froze. Where have you been? What is that? Too late, I realized the lights that illuminated the trailer park were shining through the windows, glinting off the reflective paint of the sign. You're dreaming, dude, I said softly. Go back to sleep. Race didn't buy it. He sat up, pawed for the lamp on the end table, and knocked it to the floor. Let me see that. I kept moving. Cody! I stopped. Kid, what do you think you're doing? You want to wind up in juvie? It's just a street sign. Yeah, and it's against the law to take them home with you. Oh, I suppose that's something you'd never do, huh? I stared pointedly at the wall above the TV, where the East 8th Avenue sign hung. It had taken me a while to make the connection. 8 was his car number. I was in college when I got that. So you're saying I'm too young to steal a street sign? Hell, I got that crap from everyone. I was too young to smoke, too young to drink, too young to understand. Did everyone over the age of 21 think teenagers were complete morons? No, kid, it's just... Race's voice trailed off. He rubbed his face as if he'd suddenly been stricken with the monster of all headaches. Well, that's what it is, right? You don't think I'm old enough, but it's perfectly okay that you did it. Cody, Race pleaded, what the hell is it with people? Don't you think kids have any rights? Listen, No, I'm not going to listen. I'm not a baby. Either it's right or it's wrong. It's not okay just because you were older. I kicked his drafting table. An assortment of pens and pencils fell off, rattling to the floor. Okay, you're right, Ray said. It was just as bad when I did it, but you can't take these chances. You've already had one running with the cops. So maybe I like having you around. I glowered at Race across the living room. Then, slowly, I sank down into the laundry chair. He liked having me around? I mean, I knew he didn't mind me being here, but he actually wanted me? Grace looked steadily at me. You can't keep doing this, Cody, taking stupid chances and losing your temper. Actions have consequences. You can't go around doing whatever you want, expecting to get off scot-free. It was too much. The seriousness in his eyes, the reasonable tone of voice, the admission that he liked having me around. I couldn't look at him. So, what do you want me to do? I asked, staring down at my Converse high tops. Put it back? Hell no, you get busted for sure. But if you ever do something like this again, I'll kick your ass. Grace flopped back down in the tangle of blankets on the couch. Now go to bed. I got up and headed for my room. Behind me, Grace muttered in exasperation. When people pawn a teenager off on you, they ought to send along an owner's manual.